it's also interesting where when you are an entrepreneur and when you're in these situations, because you built this out of passion for it, it's sometimes hard to recognize when you're doing what you love, that even that can have a negative impact on you. It's harder to realize when you love what you're doing. Like, this is truly what I'm meant to be doing. But if I only allow it to take up space in my life, then I'm missing such a crucial other part of my life, which is the enjoyment of what I do outside of what I do.
This is the Conscious Economics Podcast, and I'm your host, Rhiannon Rosalind. This is the place where we explore people, planet, profit, and art through the lens of the new economy. If you're interested in changing yourself, getting more creative, or changing the system at large, then this is the podcast for you. Tune in every other week as we explore these topics with amazing guests. We'll go deep, we'll go heart-centered and soul-felt as we go into how we change ourselves and change the world. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Conscious Economics Podcast. I am your host, Rhiannon, and I am here with such a fun episode. So, okay, you guys know how much I love hats, right? Because I'm always in them. And some of you ask me, hey, where did you get that really cool one? I just posted on my Instagram story actually last week. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be a few weeks ago, but of this really beautiful lavender, kind of pinkish, purplish top hat that I just wore to an event. And that was created by our guest today. So Jay Mitchell is one of the founders of Coup de Tete, which is an incredible Canadian bespoke house specializing in fur felt hats and leather products here in Toronto. And Jay is just an unbelievable conscious economy entrepreneur. He's an artist, he's an innovator, and the way he's cultivating the experience, not only for his customers, but also for the folks that are working with him and the community surrounding his business, you'll see that it is so in line with what we believe in here at Conscious Economics. He really is just in such conscious integrity with the way he moves through life as a business owner, as a creator, as someone who really wants to give back to community and give back to artists and entrepreneurs. So of course it made sense that he would come on the show, and we get into a little bit about how we're getting to know each other more deeply. Jay shares with us how he got started in creating his incredible company, how he became a hat maker, and all the rest. Such a rad, cool story. What an incredible person. So I hope you enjoy this episode with the one, the only Jay Mitchell. Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for coming into the space.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
It's looking super cool over there. Now, usually before I start talking to anyone that I'm having on the podcast, I like to anchor why I've asked you to be here. So I'm just going to tell you my version of that, which is this podcast is about bringing conscious economy leaders onto the platform. And I see you as a conscious economy, new economy leader from the minute I walked into your space and I met you and I, connected with all the beautiful people that you have around you. There was something that ignited in me. And as a hat lover, which all the audience knows, I love hats. I've never, ever had an experience like the one that you've given me in creating my customs. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It was really interesting when you invited me to a dinner last week and you're like, there's going to be a whole bunch of influential business people and stuff here. And you're like, at best, you're going to meet some amazing people. At worst, we're going to have dinner and we're going to have a good time. And walking into that space and sitting down, I was like, what am I doing here? I was like, this is not my crowd. This is not where I was more curious than anything. But it was you and I sitting with one of my staff members, Zoe, and sitting around a table, and these conversations are being struck up, and you and I are just having a great night, getting to know each other a little bit more. And then when you got up as a keynote speaker and you started telling your story, it very much like really connected with me. And then near the end of the conversation, you began talking about conscious economics. And at that point, the light bulb went off and I was like, oh, I'm here as the example.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this like extremely humbling feeling for me. And also when you spoke about conscious economics and a new way of looking at how we run businesses, I was just like so emotional just in that aspect of it. Because I was like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I believe in. This is like how I want to run my business. And then that like moment of like, okay, that's why I'm here. And so I thank you for inviting me there and the wonderful like surprises that I had throughout that night and the emotions I had through that night. It was just fantastic. So I'm really glad to be here to talk about it now that I have the like confidence of, yeah, this is what I believe in. This is what I'm trying to do with my business.
Yes. And it's so evident to me, and it's not you're trying to do, you're doing it. And I just almost cried there when you said that, because that's exactly it. You are an example and you hold that vibration. And so inviting you into that space, because we still have to interact with those spaces, especially as we're growing our businesses. We have to encounter all different people who are at different levels of understanding what the vision is for the future. And in doing that and you being there, and just like you and Zoe holding space and all of us being in our hats too, like it just like the artist in all of us was drawing people over to us. And I always have thought of entrepreneurship as artistry. Like since I'm a kid, that's through and through the way that I look at business as art. And so you, in just your essence and all of it, you embody that so deeply and you reflect something to me that I know is true. And so I'm just so excited for our journey and our friendship, which like we'll get into. We're hanging, we're going to be doing some stuff. But for the purpose of getting started here, because you have so many cool stories and I got to hear some of them that night. So I want everyone in our community to be able to get to know you. Let's start off with courage. Because it takes courage to actually pursue your own path as an artist, as a creative. And you've been doing that. It sounds like your whole life you've been kind of on this other path, the one that you create on your own. So what gave you that courage? Who instilled that in you? And how did you learn to trust yourself to pursue your own direction?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I grew up really lends to it is I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere in northern BC, and just out of necessity, learning when a tractor breaks down, you can't just call a mechanic to fix it. You can't just quickly dial up a number and then somebody's there and the problem is solved. So just out of necessity, because the nearest town was a half an hour away, so help was half an hour away at all times. And so growing up in a more remote community, my parents really taught us to be self-sufficient, and I was constantly learning how to fix things myself, how to really, if there was any problem, it would be solved by ourselves. In our shop, we would have to make something out of scrap metal or whatever it was to be able to fix the situation so that we could continue the work. So that was like a big thing, and kind of why I am like, you call yourself a serial entrepreneur. I'm a serial DIY. Like this space, because we do a handmade product, we knew that we had to do all of this space by hand as well, so that you could feel that when you came into it. And so that way of growing up, and also I think back to like coming up with wild ideas and pitching them to my dad. Like, I want to build stilts, or I want to build a grappling hook so I can climb trees and walls and stuff like that. And he was like, oh yeah. And we would go out to the shop and we would start building this thing. And what I thought was just fun, I was learning how to weld, how to bend metal, how to do all these like very important skills to have. But it was that idea of I could come up with something, and then with some help from like my dad or my grandpa or my mom or someone on the farm, I would be able to make it a reality. So I think that kind of like really instilled that thing of like, if I can think it up, I can do it. And so that continued on. And when I eventually found myself like on the path of building this business, it has always been based on that. And having my sister be my business partner who grew up the same way, it's very much like dream it and then you can make it happen as long as you just are as passionate about it. And you just, if you want it to happen, it can happen. You just need to do the research or ask someone for a bit of advice, but you can do it. And so that's kind of, I think I was just raised that way.
I love it so much. And in listening to it, obviously knowing your sister as well, just honoring the lineage, because to have parents that say, yes, you can make stilts, like, you know, some parents would be like, no, we don't have time for that, or that's not productive or whatever. But just, you know, that you had parents that said yes has created this man and this incredible woman and your sister who are like, yes, people, like, yes, we can do it. Like I've come to you and I'm like, can I have a top hat that's like this big? And can we put barnacles on them? And you're like, yes. Like it's just always the answer is yes. And so I honor the ancestry. I honor the lineage of free spirits that it sounds like you come from. And that's so, so beautiful. So one of the things that I like to do with conscious economics is I want to redefine economy. I want to redefine business and entrepreneurship for people, because unfortunately, the journey of the entrepreneur and the entrepreneur story has been, again, kind of sidelined and taken by the man, essentially. And it's been turned into this idea like entrepreneurship is something that you go to business school for, and then it's 3x rounds and raising capital, and it's this hustle culture, and like, you know, it's this Mark Zuckerberg thing. Like, I don't know. I don't relate to that kind of entrepreneurship. I've bootstrapped everything that I've created and started, and I know you've bootstrapped and started this beautiful business of your own from just the ground. Like you've seeded it all. So what and how do you define entrepreneurship and the journey of the entrepreneur? And let's put some of that vibration out into the world.
I've been kind of ruminating on that a lot lately and thinking about how with business and building business, I think like at its core for me, it's about building community and trust within that community and compassion within that community, and thinking less about all these numbers need to start coming in order for me to be successful. Like to be successful is to create a strong community that backs you and that you also are behind. And so that has been kind of the measure. I look at like when we first opened this retail space and we did a soft launch and we just sent out a few invitations to our community and just through Instagram, we're doing a little soft launch here. Next thing you know, it was like 150 people were here. It was people I haven't seen for so long. Like some people were out of the woodworks that I hadn't seen since before the pandemic. And that night was just so overwhelming of we've really built something that like means something to people. And to have all of these like surprises throughout the evening as all these wonderful people from past and present just came through just to support us. That is where I think like the key to success in building a business is if you can build a strong community around it.
I love that so much. And the other like medicine of what you're saying, the teaching that I'm hearing again is that it's the ride, it's the journey, it's who is around you, it's the fun of it. It's like skinning your knees and getting up. Like that's what it's about. And that comes through so true in what you just said. So thank you for that. I want to ask you how you specifically became a hat maker, because that has its own story, I'm sure. So why hats and how hats?
It was a really interesting journey and like partially by accident. So growing up on a farm, never really fit in with that path. And I knew I was an artist and I wanted to go to art school. So I went to theater school on Vancouver Island and I went through that and then moved to Toronto and wanted to be an actor and quickly fell out of love with that while I was there. And then I found myself a lot of times when I was being an actor, I was portraying somebody on stage and I was really good at it. And I was like, okay, this is something that like I can do. I started becoming really uncomfortable with the times when I was just me at home, because I spent so much time playing other characters, being other things, going out and walking into a room and being whatever people needed me to be so I could get that role or I could get that thing. It was really, really uncomfortable for me. And then I had a realization one night. I was walking along Queen Street and I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I really need to focus on like who I am. And I walked into a tattoo parlor and I booked an 8-hour full sleeve. And this was before tattoos were like cool in film. And so I started getting my arms tattooed so that I would not go back on this deal. Because I knew if I left a window, because I did really love acting, I'd go back into it. So I was like, I'm just like making my mark and I'm not doing this anymore. And where I found the middle ground was with music. And so I started playing in a band, and that really, then I had never been so terrified on stage before because I was me. I was singing about my experiences on stage. And I just like became obsessed with that. And in between tours, I would work in different retail spaces, and I loved merchandising. So I did that for a number of years. And then I eventually was coming back from a tour with my band, needed to find a job before we went out on tour again. And I ended up working in a hat shop. And when I started working in that hat shop, they had like a really amazing onboarding process where you learn about the history of hat making and the history of this company. And like, shout out Gorin Brothers, they have an amazing onboarding. So I started working there. And I would take my hats on tour and they'd get beat up, or I'd change the ribbon on them. And I'd do these things to make them unique and feel like they were me. And people would start coming in the store and asking for that, or asking for a really wide brim kind of beat up rock and roller kind of hat, which was something they really didn't offer at the time. So I kind of had like a number of years of, okay, this is what a lot of people are looking for. And so I saw a gap in the market, and I started, when people would come in and they'd ask for a big wide brim hat and stuff, I'd say, we don't really have that here, but you should email this person. And then that person they'd be emailing was me, and I'd beat them, and I was like, I can't talk about that while I'm at work there, but I'll make a hat for you. And so I started doing these hats on the side, and eventually I was found out, obviously, and I was asked to leave the company. I had a choice then. It's like, I either find another Joe job that's going to fill in the gaps between touring, because music was what I really wanted to do, or I just like actually have a go at this. And so I started making hats for my friends because I was a musician. I was making hats for musicians, and they were going out on tour, and some of them really hit it big. And now they're wearing hats in front of thousands of people on stage. So just this like very natural groundswell started to happen as our hats were touring around Canada and then touring around the US. And it's like through music and me just making hats for my friends, I would go down to Kensington Market and I would buy old Stetson cowboy hats, and I'd rip the guts out of them and I'd reblock them and just try things. I had a little studio. I was living in an apartment on College Street, and I didn't even have enough room to set up a workbench, which was like an old door I found that somebody was throwing out. And so I would flip up my bed, put down this door, and just like start working on things. And I just found that it was the perfect blend of the creative side, which has always been something that like really fills me, but also working with my hands, which comes from how I grew up working on a farm. So it was kind of this blend where like creating music, acting, all of those things, it really got that creative side. It really fulfilled that need that I have in my life. But the actual working, and like, it's not easy work. Like my hands are tired at the end of each day. And like to have that again, it was kind of rediscovering that connection to my body, and then how much I love like a hard work, you know? And so it was between that. So then I was going on tour and coming back and making hats for people, and then going back out on tour and just like barely getting by. But it just kept growing to the point where now I'm full-time hat maker, all of these things. Music is something that I love to do, but I just get to do that for me. It's not that career path. It's not that thing, because this just very naturally just grew into who I am and what I do.
I love that story so much. And it's funny how we like stumble sometimes into exactly where we're meant to be and just trusting all the little no's and all the little doors that close. Like even, you got fired or you got asked to leave this rad company that you obviously liked being a part of, and you just spoke really nicely of them, but it opened this other door. And so it's just such a beautiful story to hear. And for me, like the real story of the entrepreneur is always the hero's journey in some way. It's always like that moment where you decide to go this different direction and you have no idea how it's going to work out or why or what. And you have to face all of these ghouls and monsters that are usually within yourself. And then you come back to tell the story and create community. And that's what I see now in your space. And congratulations on opening up the storefront part of the space as well. It's so excited for those of you that are listening. We'll link everything in this show notes so you can go and check out the space. But I want to ask you, and I'm usually go as deep as you want to go, but I like to talk about the hard and the struggle as well. I like to talk about the shadow side. I have made friends with my shadow. My shadow is deep and dark. I've got a Scorpio moon. It's pretty intense. And for me, like, it's interesting because my journey of entrepreneurship reflects also this journey that I've had where I really feel like I'm unemployable, honestly. Like, I don't think I can be employed by anybody else. Kind of have to employ myself because I've got a lot of quirks. I came through a lot in my life and I've had some really unique challenges that have shown up in the way that I've learned how to operate a business. What's that been for you? What have been some of the challenges? What are the things that still trip you up sometimes, if you're open to sharing?
So for me, it is, well, as we talked about before, like serial DIY. That has always been like who I am. And what I've realized throughout my journey is that is to like an extreme fault. It is something where I have struggled within that to think that I can do everything and built up it almost built up like a wall for myself where I was now not able to ask for help and not able to look at the situation and be like, oh, I need help here in this area, or I can't do everything myself. So I would be, working 6 days a week, grinding everything out and not able to actually take the time for myself outside of the business, outside of all of these things. So that has been like one of the things that I've kind of struggled to get through. And also and I think this is something that kind of goes across all small business owners and entrepreneurs and where we sit. I think there is a shame that you feel, especially amongst other small business owners, where you're comparing yourself to them, you're working through these things. There is a shame when things aren't going well, when you are struggling. It's something that we are trying to actively now break that cycle. So in the new year, we're starting a gathering once a month amongst small business owners. And it is just everybody meets in different spaces around the city from different people from all different styles of small business, whether it's a bar owner or a clothing store owner. And it's just, we're getting together a group of like-minded people to be able to just get together and talk about what's working, but more importantly, talk about what's not working. And maybe somebody within there has been through that. But it's the idea to normalize that not all days are sunshine and rainbows. And no matter how hard you try to just portray your business outwardly as like success and all of these different things, it's like, that's not the reality of a small business. That's not the reality of being an entrepreneur. It is overcoming these daily hurdles that you have to go over. And so for me, it's been like a really big year that I've been on a journey of reconnecting with myself, because as all of these problems, whether they were big or whether they were small, as all of these problems arose in my business, I would find myself being like, you can't show that. You can't feel that. You push that down and push that down and push that down and just keep portraying everything's all right.
Yeah.
Well, everything wasn't all right for me. And it started showing up in restlessness in my sleep patterns, where I would wake up at 4 a.m. and I would just be wide awake with all of these unchecked boxes in my brain, where I was like, well, okay. And then I would come up with a few like, well, what if I do this? What if I do this? What if I do this? And then I would go in, and maybe sometimes that would work. Maybe sometimes it wouldn't. So it was just this like vicious cycle. I wasn't seeing friends outside of work. It was like, I only saw my friends if they came to an event that I was having here, or this kind of thing. And I felt that like I wasn't a proper partner for my wife, where there was so much taken out of me at work that I was completely spent when I came home. So I wasn't present at home.
Yeah.
Come home exhausted, fall asleep at 8 o'clock, wake up at 4 a.m., try and work out some problems in my head until I have satisfied that like fear in me enough to be able to fall asleep a bit. Get up, go to work, rinse, repeat. And so that cycle just kept happening and happening. So through therapy, through really creating boundaries for myself within when my day is done and when I'm present at home, those kind of things, that's been like a really big journey for me this year. And also investing in relationships. Like when we met and we were able to kind of talk about like, I really want to have a friendship outside of you coming to my shop and me making hats for you. Like we saw something in each other. We wanted to get to know each other more. I have that with a few different people where, and some of them being entrepreneurs as well, us kind of talking about like, let's not have this always be business.
Exactly.
And so by creating those boundaries, I've been able to, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still have my 4 o'clock mornings. But I have been able to kind of start to try and build a healthy schedule that works for me. And also by realizing that I needed help and hiring more staff and like trusting in that staff to be able to help share the load and inspiring them to be a part of that journey.
Thank you so much for your honesty. I hear so much of my own story in what you've shared, and honestly, in working with entrepreneurs all across this country, it's such a common load that we carry on our shoulders because we feel responsible at the end of the day for our communities, for the people that rely on us, that work with us, our families, and it's this unbelievable pressure to be the one that always has to hold it. And, you know, for me, I dealt with that I was a workaholic and it was my only answer to all the challenges was just to keep going and keep pushing and pushing. But also for me, like it came in alcohol and in substances. Like I just was, the only way I could calm my nervous system was to numb, like to just kind of shut her down with whatever. And it just was not serving me in my particular phase and similarly. And so conscious economics is like, how could we create businesses and be entrepreneurs, but use consciousness expanding modalities to actually like clear the energetic container that we do hold at the end of the week? Like it's a real thing, but is there other things we could use? Like what would that look like? Like what if we, you know, did some practices in nature at the end of the week? Or what if we blocked certain time where we did breath work or we worked with these other modalities that actually clear our channel and nourish us so that we can give back? And these were the things that we started exploring. So I love that you're there, that you've had that aha, that, you know, ship broke down a little bit.
Yeah, it's also interesting where when you are an entrepreneur and when you're in these situations, because you built this out of passion for it, it's sometimes hard to recognize when you're doing what you love, that even that can have a negative impact on you. It's harder to realize when you love what you're doing. Like, this is truly what I'm meant to be doing. But if I only allow it to take up space in my life, then I'm missing such a crucial other part of my life, which is the enjoyment of what I do outside of what I do.
Well, and that actually fuels we're going to get into creativity. What does it really actually take to keep your creative channel open? And one thing that I noticed, same thing, if you are a musician and you go on tour, in the beginning, you're like, this is what I always wanted to do, and singing these songs, and like, it's the best. And then all of a sudden there becomes a time when you're just starting to autopilot even the thing that you love, right? Because you're freaking tired and you're on the road and whatever it is. And I know that, and just being with my own band for a while there, and like that feeling of like, I'll never get sick of this. And then being like, oh, like I'm starting to lose something because you're not nurturing your own self and you're not able to be present in that moment. This podcast is brought to you by Mindfulness and Money. Mindfulness and Money is our new annual membership program designed to meet you where you are at and thoughtfully help you heal your issues with money. Join Asil Albaba, our in-house financial therapist, and myself, Rhiannon Rosalind, as we help you uncover all the deep-seated blocks that are preventing you from living your most authentic, powerful expression with money and out in the world. So if you're interested in joining, you can go ahead to consciouseconomics.ca and click on Mindfulness and Money to find out how to sign up. There's also a free trial option for those of you that want to dip your toe in before making a commitment for the year. The program is designed to be a democratized access for financial coaching and financial therapy. We have some very accessible pricing for you with options within as well, so that you can make your own conscious decision what you are able to afford as you start this healing journey. We hope to see you there. So with that said, how do you now, because it sounds like you've been through a time where even hat making like grinded you down a little bit, even though you love it, how do you keep your creative vessel clear? How do you keep yourself well and with enough spaciousness so that the new incredible ideas can actually have room to like birth through and come through? What does your practice look like right now?
I mean, a big part of it is when I brought on Zoe, who we talked about earlier, but being able to be in a mentor role. Mm-hmm. And so it's now been a few months since she went from like a traditional kind of apprentice role to being one of the hat makers here at the company. And it was just because through her learning from me, it was just like I knew it was time for her to start taking on her own projects and like doing her own customs and kind of finding her identity within it. But having somebody who you can just bounce ideas off of, and also seeing, it's been great because seeing the struggles that she'll have creatively and helping her through those is like reminding myself of how to get through creative struggles and those kind of things. So that's always been such a huge blessing for me, is to have somebody else who's in it on that creative side. And aside from that is really being like laser focused with my downtime to make sure that I'm well rested, as well as that when I have those free time, when I have those things, that I'm going out and I'm seeing people that fill my cup, as I like to call it. And so it is those going out and doing very specific things that I know bring me great joy. And if I'm able to bring that joy from my downtime into the workspace at the beginning of the week, and it's also how we schedule everything here in the shop. Like, we're recording this on a Monday. It's just me here on Mondays. And it allows me to go into the space. I do a lot of filming of content and stuff like that. But it also allows me to settle within the space, just me. Not going in with people who have questions about, okay, what are we doing this week? All of those things. I get to come into a calm space and kind of set my week. And that has been like so fantastic for me. And so just starting the week where it's it's just mine this day, where I work at my pace. I start that week off. It's like, going for that morning run. That is my Monday, is like, it gets the blood pumping. It gets things going. And it just like really helps me settle into a week where I can take and write out all the things I want to accomplish, all of that. And it's without any sort of outside voices coming into it.
I love that so much. And again, in some of those practical ways of creating new economy, conscious economy businesses, it's about taking some of that time back or reorienting the value of time and realizing that you need that time. We do the same thing. Like we honor a 4-day work week. And for me, that Monday is not that I'm not working. I'm getting anchored and settled into what I'm going to give for the rest of the week, how I'm going to inspire my team, how I'm going to show up full and, with love and excitement inside of me and feel organized and ready for that. And for me too, I've got 2 young sons. So transitioning out of whatever mom mode was and getting back into that groove. So I love that you're carving that time for yourself. And I really find that as artists, as creatives, it's so important that we constantly see new scenery, that we see new things, that we take in other aesthetic, other people, other culture. It's so, so critical to keep the juices going. Like you may be inspired, knowing you, like you may be inspired by like seeing a humpback whale like go off into the water or something, like maybe I'm gonna make a hat. Like who knows, right? So
yeah, you never know where you're gonna find that inspiration, and it's just like presenting yourself with opportunities to be inspired. And I think that that's like such a crucial thing, and it's also something that like we try to implement within our team. And so like that's super important, is like we have tons on our plate and there's lots of stuff that we have to do. But if we don't take time, and sometimes it's even just like that last hour of the workday, if the sun's shining, we are sitting out in front of the shop and talking about things, but just like talking about life, like kind of disconnecting from that work that like we all know what we have to get done in a week, but allowing like the conversations and just like the enjoyment of just like being outside for a little bit, and resetting and then coming back in with a new intention.
I love it. And I also love, like, I think another new economy thing is actually training your customer to be in flow. So obviously sometimes, you have an order, you have to get it done at a certain time, but if you are in the custom world and you are able to, just create that exchange where it's like, hey, like this is going to come when it comes, like it's going to be what it is. And there is a little bit more room that we can play with so that we can take that moment when the sun's shining just perfect and you got to do it. It's like coming out of that really rigid sort of way of doing, which feels counterintuitive to business because we've been trained that it's the opposite. So being able to find that balance, like even for us this year, last year, we were like, we're not working with certain people anymore. Like we actually like declined certain funders that we were working with because we weren't on the same vibration in terms of how we wanted to work. And that was freaking scary as hell to do. But what it did is it created space for aligned ones to come through, and it feels better, so it's that trust that you will receive what you also allow to kind of expand out into your own field. And it's a really, really cool give and take.
And I feel like that goes the same for the customer. And that's what we're training our customers to understand, because I was in the same situation where it was just like when we moved into this space, our rent doubled. We took on staff. It was just like we had to turn a decrepit old garage into a retail space. It was just like we were bleeding money. And so we're bringing in machines from Colombia that I've been searching for like 7 years. And it's all very exciting, but it's just like our bank account isn't endless. So it was always just like acquiescing to a client that just is being a little bit difficult or just doesn't understand the process or doesn't have an appreciation for our time. And then in the last little while, like I remember my sister was designing a piece and somebody wanted a recreation of a hat that we guaranteed was one of a kind. And I said, well, we can do something similar, but that last one was guaranteed one of a kind, and I will honor that client when they have it, that it will be one of a kind. I can't just recreate it. And so we redo the artwork, we change it up, we make it very unique for this person. And they're like, no, I just want the other thing. And we just like issued a refund, and we're like, obviously, like it's just not getting through that we aren't going to recreate this piece, because I gave my word that that piece was one of a kind. And there's no amount of money, no amount of stress, all of those things. Like, it's just not worth it to me to go through this process when we're not meeting on the same plane, when we're not there to work together. I don't want to work for people. I want to work together with people, which comes back to what we were talking about, community.
Community, integrity, like these are values of conscious economy leaders that you embody. And I remember when I first came into the shop for the first time, I think I bought one of your, customs off the rack, or one of your off the rack. They're all unique, but I ended up, and I remember Rye turning to me and he was like, hey, like, if you don't have the cash on you right now or whatever, like just pay us when you can. Like, and I was like, huh? Like, I was thrown off at first, and I was like, there's such a trust here already. Like, there's such a family feeling as soon as I've come in here, where like even that act of trust. And so like I literally like marched down the road and like took money out of the machine and then marched back in. But like he was like, wear the hat. Like, he was just like so awesome about it. And I know that sounds like a little thing, but it's about being able to create that space where you're attracting a kind of customer that's going to be inspired by the way that you serve and by the way that you co-create. And for those that don't get it, they won't get it right now. And that's okay too. Like, I've always said to my team, customer isn't always right. I hate that teaching. I hate that. Like, I've seen a customer come into our organization and belittle people that work for me that are like my family. Yo, that customer is not always right. Like, they can leave and they can take their money back gladly, and I don't want them in our house, kind of thing. And like, I've always said that, like, I don't believe in some of those classic ways that we've been trained and taught. So it's really interesting. One question I had for you, because the business that you actually run is a challenging business. Like, when you're manufacturing and you're getting products shipped and there's all this supply chain, and it's a complex business. It can be scary for some. And again, as the entrepreneur and as the creative and as the innovator, sometimes we feel like we have to be really good at all of it, or there's something wrong with us. And I know that was how I felt. I was like, fuck, man, I can't tell anyone that I'm like shit at this, and like someone's gonna like find out and kick me off the bus. Like, and so I was pretending a lot. And where my liberation came was actually being like, I am so good at what I'm good at, but I am not necessarily great at some of these other things, and that's okay. And I don't need to fucking fake it. Like, I can get help and support. How have you been on that? And like, what's that part look like for you?
Well, I think like a really telling thing from this was the text I sent you the night after your speech, where I told you, I was like, I am really bad at asking for help. And I'm very inspired by what you do and your teachings and like the way that you see business in the future. And so it's something that I'm learning. I definitely know where a lot of my like inefficiencies are as a business owner. And with that, it's like everybody's very quick to celebrate my strengths, like, and those kind of things. It is when it comes to those inefficiencies that we have, because for a big part of it, like, I don't have the capacity to be great at web design or the knowledge or the skills. And so I also don't have the capacity for building the systems. My sister does that, you know, and that is like where her strength is. But her strength is also in some of the art and the like innovating that we're doing within the space. So trying to find a balance for her where she can build those things, like build the systems that are going to keep our company running smoothly and smarter and more efficient, but also allowing her to be creative and really feeding that side of it. It's that balancing act. And for me, what I'm finding is now that I have a bit more space because I have another hat maker that works here now. So now the soul creation on the creative side, it's not just up to me. So now I have a chance to look at where those things that I'm not so good at, and I can ask for help. I can also learn more about it, get better at things,
Yeah.
add another skill that I can bring to the table. And so it's about allowing yourself, one, to admit that I'm not good at this,
Yeah.
but also giving yourself the opportunity to be like, but what if I was?
Yeah. And I love that because it has to come from a place of empowerment, meaning if we feel we're not good at something and we just say, oh, so I'm going to ignore that or I'm going to hire someone, we carry this little pebble in our shoe of shame. And that's no good for anyone. That's not evolving. That's not growing our consciousness. But if we actually acknowledge the thing that we're a little afraid of or that it's not coming as naturally, and we go into it and we discover it and we start to understand it and cultivate a relationship with it, eventually, once we understand that, we can also go back and say, and I'm not going to take that on, but I get it. I understand it. I know how to support someone and ask the right questions to make sure it's going okay. Like that's the other piece. So I love that you're doing that. And shout out to Zoe for like coming in and like ramping stuff up and being there. She's so badass. I'm so excited to see like her in the shop and as a woman as well to like see another woman working with her hands and like making those pieces that way. Like it's super, super radically cool. So loving it. Now we do talk a little bit about money here because there's just, it's got a bad rap, money in general, I think. And I feel like the psychology of money is so unique for each of us. We all have our own emotional relationship to it. And just to kind of anchor you into it, I had the privilege of growing up in a low income household. And I say privilege because I got to have a global education without traveling because I lived in community housing. So I had friends from all around the world that I was exposed to. And I got to like, eat dinners at different tables every night because we were all trying to like help each other out. And there was this different sense of community because of that. And I didn't realize until later that I wasn't like fitting in or something wasn't just normal because that's kind of how it is with kids. But the other thing that I grew up around is hearing these stories of like poor people are good people and like we work with, we work hard and wealthy people are not good people or they're taking advantage or something else. These were some of the narratives and I took them in. And so, in my career and in my life, ending up working on Bay Street and being with like all of these powerful, very wealthy people, I didn't realize that I had this little subconscious narrative that was running in the back of my mind that was making me feel uncomfortable around money and was also making me overgive. So like every time I would have a big win with the business, I'd like shovel it all out the door on like another venture, another thing. And like I'd always end up that my bank account would stay at the same place. So even if like a big thing came in, somehow I'd manage to like spend it off or like invest in something or whatever to bring me back to this place that was my subconscious comfort zone in not like selling out what my family was or whatever it is. So I had to like get in there and like excavate that shit in order to fix it. And so I wonder for you, like what were some of the stories around money or what are some of the things that you find that you hold in your sort of psychology around money or your emotion around money?
So it's a really interesting one for me. It is like later in life, this really came into play. And that was just, I didn't like to talk about money.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like to have to worry about it. And I was doing fine enough that I didn't really have to worry about money. But I didn't like to talk about it. Like still to this day, like whenever I get paid, it goes into this joint account. My wife, then she has all the bills automated, all the things. It's just something that I've just been like, I don't want to talk about the money.
Yep.
I didn't want to do that with my business. And I was talking to a friend of mine who I really admire and is like this amazing businessman. And he was like, you need to be able to tell me the numbers of your last year.
Yeah.
Like you own this, you're a partial owner of this business. Like this is a business that's built around your creativity. You need to be able to tell me these things when we have a conversation. And I like had a bunch of like wake up moments with that. And then through conversations with my wife, and she's like, well, if we want to do these traveling things, like we really need to like sit down and look at a budget. And that just gave me so much, like I have this like really weird relationship with money these days. And it's also about when I've always had an aversion to any time that I've spoke to an investor, like a potential investor into my company, somebody who like believes in what we're doing and all of these things. I immediately have my back up about it because I grew up on a farm where it was, these are the things we need. You do this and it buys this.
Yeah.
And then you do this and it buys this. And it's a much longer process to get things, but it's a very safe, very responsible kind of like path for somebody who grew up in like middle class in a blue collar scenario. So having grown up in that, it really kind of led to even how we run the business now of I come up with these dreams and then my sister's like, well, we do this much stuff, then we can do this. We do this, then we can do this. And it's like all of this, it's a very slow growth, natural way to just grow it where we don't owe anybody anything. And like for that just comes down to like, I love at the end of the day that I don't owe anybody anything for this company. Everything we've done, we have made the money, we have spent it on things, which has made us this money and those kind of things. But what I realized is that if I want to, all of a sudden, I think it kind of changed when we started bringing in employees. And it wasn't just like my name that was on this. Now I have like people I really care about that I'm responsible for and the success of this business is responsible for. And also understanding that because I didn't like talking about money, it was my sister having to make the hard choices and doing those things instead of making those choices with me and having somebody who can understand it with her. So it's like really my like next year is understanding like what would an investment in our company look like? What are those things like? Because how can I start to look at a way where I don't just have to take care of like the 3 people that we have working for us. How do I take care of 12? How do I grow this thing? How do I start allowing this business to grow as fast as the things that I think up in my head?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just like, so the path, I could get there eventually if I keep on the path that I'm currently on, but I would have to constantly either say goodbye to certain creative dreams and say, okay, well, I don't know when we're going to get to that. And I find that it stifles creativity because I'll have something that I'm really passionate about. And it's like, well, we aren't really financially there right now, but we will get there. And by the time we get there, I have something I'm way more passionate about. And that little dream has died along the way. So it's now looking at like, I really want to become a lot more financially literate in our business. And not have just that weight being on my sister, who, by the way, is phenomenal at it. But that's the best teacher. I have the best teacher that can teach me and make me feel more comfortable with this. And also the work that your business partner does. Like, I really want to do some work within that of like looking at the therapy of money and like how we deal with it. And I'm very interested in that as well, to just try and, that's my like big goal for next year is to not fear it, but embrace and really try and take more ownership of that side of my business.
Thank you for your honesty. And you called in the conscious economy goddess. So you clearly are ready for some of this work. So, and I do believe we call people in when we're ready. Like we vibrationally call people in. So one of the interesting things with you, and I relate, so what you are saying, and there's a name for it, it's called financial avoidance. So you're a financial avoidant. And I know because I'm a financial avoidant. So I like to do all the good, fun stuff and I don't want to look at it. I don't like to open it even. I just, it impacts my nervous system too much. And in order for me to, this is what I told myself, in order for me to stay good with the staff and everything, I actually don't want to be fluctuating with the account like you do with as a business owner, right? Because like you could fulfill a big order and you see a big thing go out and you're like, oh shit. And if I look at that, or this is my, previous ways, if I would look at that, I'd feel a little down and a little heavy, and then I wouldn't be able to bring what I needed to. So I learned how to avoid it and surround myself with people I could trust in order to kind of maintain, but it's a false maintenance that we're doing with that. And again, there's this idea around like the investors or like, needing a little bit of like lighter fluid in order to ignite what this is, because it's all around you, and I'll explain it after. There's a lot in your aura in terms of what's coming and what you're building, and it's actually really big. So what is exciting is being able to call in and match that energy with how we work with money consciously. And so probably this avoidance would show up emotionally with you too. When things get really emotionally tough, you'd rather kind of like get away from that or walk away or distract or whatever. So it's actually coming into that and seeing the correlation as we heal that. Then the financial literacy comes, because the financial literacy coming first without dealing with the emotional block, you just don't like it. It doesn't really work that way. So it's really, really cool that you're thinking about that. I'm so excited to work with you on those things. And people in our community that listen to this show are like on this train, so they know exactly what we're talking about. And it's so awesome that you're speaking about this. I want to go into your essence a little bit, because I find you very inspiring. Like when I'm in your field of energy, I feel ignited and I feel excited. So I know that you're cultivating a particular essence, and I wonder what and how you cultivate that. So from culture to music to, what are you watching? What lights you up, and how do you cultivate this very unique, Jay essence that you carry? What inspires you, and where do you, seek and find that?
It's the cool thing about working in custom. So working in custom, I am able to be inspired by all the people that come through the shop and their ideas. Like, I definitely will take ideas from watching great Westerns where I see a great cowboy hat that's all beat up and dusty, and I love that. And I'm like, oh, I want to create something like that. But it's one of those things that, like, I've been doing it now for almost a decade. And I now look for less inspiration outside, and I just allow this new way that we're trying to run our business of, I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and somebody asked me, what is it that Coup de Tete is? And like at its very core, its essence. And I said, Coup de Tete is a place that provides. And it provides not only for the people who work here, it provides a safe space for them to be able to be creative within, but it provides a space for people to come into and have their say. And so the whole concept around this business that I want to build is that it's not just, I see that, I want that. It is, I want to make something with you. And so it's through these conversations that I have with people all across the world, because it always, like a design consult, I think I've done maybe 5 that weren't over the phone in the years that I've been doing this. And that was with language barrier. So we're just emailing back and forth and sending pictures and doing that because we needed the translation option. But for the most part, it's like, it's a phone call and it's talking to somebody on the phone. And I was talking to Zoe about this a little while ago, and she was like, what happens when you're having like this custom consultation and they're not giving you a lot? They're not quite sure about things. And I told her, ask them what they do for a living. Ask them, what's the last great concert you've been to? Tell me about your wardrobe. What gets you excited when you get dressed in the morning? Like, what's your favorite color? You start asking that, and one, it starts to give you this picture of who this person is that you're creating for. But 2, all of a sudden you have this personal connection, because as you're having that conversation, you're making all of these connections to you and your experience. So now you have this extra connection to somebody, and it really puts you in that position of, oh, I know you now. So I'm making something for you because I know you. And it's not just, I want this blue hat with this and this and this, and they send you a couple pictures for reference. It's like, I know that your favorite thing is raw denim jeans, and that the last concert you went to was a Jack White concert. So you like a little bit rock and roll, but you're a little country too. And it's like those kind of things. So you create this personal relationship with someone. And by creating that, then it becomes much easier to create for them.
I love, love, love everything that you just said so much, so much. And it's been my experience, like coming in and working with you. I've cried both times that I've seen my customs be done, and my newest piece, which is this really little exaggerated, it doesn't even feel that exaggerated for me. I don't know, but an exaggerated top hat. That's
because you're larger than life.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know, somehow this feels like totally fine, but it just has such an essence that feels so me in it. And yeah, I love everything that you just said. Obviously, I can feel that little bit of country, little bit of rock and roll vibe in everything that you guys do. And when I come into the shop, you know, everybody has their own unique essence. You've attracted really beautiful people that work in the space, and it's just like a fun time every time we get to come in and enjoy it.
With that experience, like, because the pieces that I've made for you is like very outside of what like I normally make and stuff, but what I'm really trying to do is, I think the reason why you had that response is like you feel seen when you see your piece, right?
Yes.
And that, I think that's exactly what we're kind of talking about here, is like getting to know somebody, allowing yourself to be inspired by a different set of circumstances, a different sartorial look, just like all the wild ideas, drawing of a pickle lady. It's all of the things that are just like allowing yourself to be inspired by somebody in their different circumstances. And like, I really hope, and I ask you, like, do you feel seen when you see your pieces?
I feel so seen in a way that I haven't even maybe been able to see myself. Like, it's this interesting thing. And again, for me, the hat experience, because I was like doing a reclamation of myself, because when I was in my role at the Economic Club of Canada for so long, I felt like I had to mute myself and take parts of me off in order to be respected in that space and to hold the space that I was holding. And so when I sold that company, I started to reclaim myself by putting my hat, and even like toques, like I literally always wear a hat. Like that's just me in general. And so as I started to come back into like a nice wide brim hat and started to occupy that part of myself again, eventually in getting those customs from you, it was like, oh, this is like my full essence coming in now in this piece that are lifetime pieces. Like I will give these hats to my children when I die, quite literally. Like it's just so special. And again, in a world of fast fashion and all of these like consumable pieces that just end up in the trash, like to have something that is to be preserved is to be like a timepiece. Quite honestly, we usually think of the watch as that, but like these are timepieces in terms of a period of time, your expression at that time, what it meant, where it traveled, where it went, like all of it is so beautiful. So yes, that was my long answer long, and like I feel seen.
That's amazing. And I think it's also like really cool to see when you put those pieces on and you talking about how you had to feel like you would have to meet yourself, and that we talk a lot about the hats being armor. We work with people who are in transitioning periods in their lives where a big event and they finally feel comfortable to express themselves fully, whether it was a divorce, or sometimes we work with like people who are just coming out of chemo, those kind of things. It's these like life altering, as we were talking about before, when you're in the shit. And so when you come out of it, when you see like you put on this giant iridescent top hat and walk into a room full of the people that you used to mute yourself for.
Exactly.
And you occupy that space, and you wear this giant piece that is just a symbol of, I'm here, this is me, and I'm occupying this space. Like it was such a emotional moment just to see that and to see how you just like owned that space and just held it. And it was cool to see that artistically I was able to create something that lent to that walk up there and that owning of the space. It was really a real treat for me.
Thank you so much for seeing me through that, because yes, that was the first time I went back in front of that audience since I have transitioned out. It was literally the first time, and it was a big healing for me that day personally to just be my full expression and self and own every piece of it. And like I said, having you both in the space in your hats too, it held a particular space for me, which was so beautiful. And what I did is I invited my little girl version of me, like my inner child, and I was like, pictured her sitting in the audience, getting to look up at who we became, like who she is and who she became and how she grew up and how she holds herself and the things that she says. And all I cared about was that she was proud that day, that part of me was proud of what I became. And this is exactly it when we are our true essence and self, and that fashion or those incredible pieces can actually help us express those things. And that's where we take conscious business to a whole level, because people will be like, how's fashion conscious business? It's like, it absolutely is the way you're doing it, brother. It absolutely is. So it's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me. I obviously just want to like hang out all the time and have so many other things that I could say. But to wrap this in respect of your time, I want to ask you one last question. I didn't prepare you for this at all. If you could make one hat for one person, alive, dead, someone coming from the future, like who would that be?
I don't think I've met them yet. It's interesting. I think it's probably somebody from the future. It is somebody that I haven't met yet. I would love to, in the past, I would have loved to make a hat for my grandfather. It was his hat that kind of led me a bit down the path, and it was always this, like, he wore it every day while he was alive, and it got handed down to me later in life. And it was the quality of it after he wore it every day is something that I strive to do in the quality of the product that I have. So I would say probably in the past, my grandfather, but honestly, like, there's such a unique part of every person that comes through. And I look at, like, I had no idea who you were when you walked into my shop. And then I saw Conscious Economics and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And you started showing me like the imagery around it and that. And then next thing you know, I'm sitting in a room full of the most influential people in business in Toronto. And I'm hearing this story and I'm seeing this like amazing woman who is like speaking my language and not speaking theirs, but not afraid to tell it like it is in front of all these people, saying, if you don't change your business practices, if you don't start thinking about these things, you won't make it. And so like the thought that all of that just came from the fact that I just get to make a hat and I get to connect with you just like on a creative level and we get to create something together. Like, you are the ideal person that I want to make with. I want to be surprised by people. And you really surprised me and you continue to surprise me. It's something I really enjoy about our conversations and as we've been getting to know each other more. So it's hard to really pinpoint like a specific person or thing. I just continue to be surprised every day by the people that come in.
That's like the best answer. I love it so much. And I text you that night after the thing, I text you my favorite line that Ted Rogers, so Ted Rogers, you know, the media mogul, great Canadian entrepreneur. And I actually had the privilege of hosting him in his last public appearance before his passing. So he passed away 1 month after he gave this speech. And I was a young, impressionable kid at the time. And he was telling his story of entrepreneurship. And, you know, he was like one of the classics, like the old gentleman who used to go down to all the trucks for all the guys that were putting out the cable. And he'd give $100 out to the guy who had the cleanest truck. And he wrote me a handwritten thank you note after the event, which was big, you know, for a guy like him. And I was like an event coordinator at the time. But his famous line is always, the best is yet to come. The best is yet to come. And honestly, when I think about you and I think about the business, Jay, the best is yet to come for you, for me, for all of us. I know that. So thank you so much for spending this beautiful time with me. I'm so inspired all the time and can't wait for you to make Cucumber Lady, which is my next hat that I want.
Yes, absolutely.
So excited. Yeah.
Yes, we will talk off pod. I have ideas and I've sourced some things. It's going to be good.
I'm so excited. And so for all the listeners, where can they go to check you out? Where's the best place to connect with the brand?
The best way to actually connect with us is through Instagram. You can look up Coup de Tete with underscores in between the words, but also our website, coupdetete.ca. You can see all of the pieces that we make. And also we've built a custom hat builder. So if you're not as comfortable having the in-depth conversations and those kind of things, we wanted to provide a way for people to be able to kind of imagine. And also if you don't know exactly what you want, we have an online hat builder and you can just kind of choose your color and pinch and kind of map out something so that it gives you the opportunity to feel a little bit more like, okay, now I know what I want. But yeah, if you're throwing a DM to Coup de Tete, you'll either be speaking to me or my business partner, Rye. We answer everything to the two of us, so you're talking right with us. So yeah, you can find us on Instagram or on our website, or you can stop by our shop. We're right off Roncesvalles on Dundas West here in Toronto. Please stop by. You can come and check out the showroom, and then you can come and see we have our manufacturing floor right in the back, so you can kind of get a look into how it's all made by hand here in the shop.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And that was that. I hope you all go and check out Coup de Tete and go onto the Instagram. Honestly, check out some of the beautiful, beautiful pieces that they are creating on there. Such an incredible community. They do some events sometimes in their shop. So if you are local, check it out. What a pleasure it was to sit down with Jay. I hope you enjoyed that episode and you took away as much as I did. And for those of you that are listening from across the country, we have just launched, as I mentioned, our annual Mindfulness and Money program. So for those of you that want to go deeper in your own healing process, this is a really accessible program now that you can sign up for on consciouseconomics.ca. And it'll actually take you through a really deep opportunity to work directly with our financial therapist, Cecile. It's 12 months and 12 different topics and themes that we'll be working through with community. So check it out if you can. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Conscious Economics podcast. Bye for now.